Now, if you want to reproduce sexually, we're going to need to make a different kind of cell to accomplish that. And that kind of cell is called a gamete. Your sperm cells or your egg cells are your gametes. And what's special about gametes is that they have half the number of chromosomes of any other cell inside your body. Skin cells have 46, kidney cells have 46, bone cells have 46, but your gametes have 23 chromosomes. If you are a human being, which I'm going to make the bold assumption and say that you probably are. Now, gametes have to be formed through a different kind of cell division. Mitosis will not give you cells with half the number of chromosomes. Mitosis only creates perfect copies, clone cells. If we want to cut the number of chromosomes in half, we need to use a form of cell division called meiosis. Meiosis cuts it in half. Now, why is cutting it in half important? Well, if I were to take one of my skin cells and one of my wife's skin cells, and I tried to mash the genetic information from both of them together to make a new offspring, a new embryo, then our offspring would have 92 chromosomes. Now, that doesn't sound so bad, but consider that certain genetic disorders like Down syndrome occur because you have just one extra copy of a chromosome, one additional chromosome. Down syndrome is caused by having 3 copies of chromosome number 21. So having a complete duplicate set, twice the number of chromosomes as a typical human being, would definitely cause a lot of problems. At least that is true for animals. Plants play by slightly looser rules than animals do, but for animals, the exact number of chromosomes is important. So we need a form of cell division that has a reduction step that cuts the total number of chromosomes down by half so that we have 23 and 23, and then when we bring them together, the fertilized zygote that's created has 46 again. Now, a typical body cell, what's called a somatic cell, has 46 chromosomes because it has 2 copies of every kind of chromosome, and there are 23 pairs. There are 23 kinds of chromosomes, and you get 1 of each kind from mom and 1 of each kind from dad. That state of having 2 copies of each chromosomes is referred to as being diploid. Okay? Your skin cells are diploid, and when they undergo mitosis, you go from a diploid parent cell to a diploid daughter cell, to 2 diploid daughter cells. But having just 1 copy of each chromosome is referred to as being haploid. So your sperm cells and your egg cells, which we refer to as gametes, are haploid cells. That's having 1 copy of every kind of chromosome. The exact number of chromosomes that you have is going to vary depending on what species we are talking about. So here I have Albert Einstein, who will be my representative Homo sapien for this particular slide, and he would have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs of chromosomes. So we got 23 from mom and 23 from dad, and it's 23 of the same kinds from each one, and they pair up. We say that they're homologous pairs. The chromosome number 1 you got from mom and the chromosome number 1 you got from dad, they are homologous with each other. They have homo, the same, logos, logic to them. They have the same reasoning. They're the same kind of chromosome. Other organisms have different numbers of chromosomes. So fruit flies, which are beloved by geneticists because they have so few chromosomes, so it's really easy to figure out where any given gene is in the fruit fly genome, they have only 4 pairs total. And having 4 pairs means that they have 8 total chromosomes. My dog Edward here has 78 chromosomes, 39 pairs of chromosomes. And so the number of chromosomes is going to vary based on the species. If you wanted to look at someone's chromosomes, what you would need to do is make an image called a karyotype. So you wait for the cells to basically get into prophase where they're all bundled up, and then we're going to extract them and lay them out next to each other. And here's a karyotype image for some particular individual. Now you guys are already familiar with the idea of sister chromatids. So I want you to separate this idea of sister chromatids away from the idea of homologous chromosomes. The homologous chromosomes are matched chromosomes of the same type. You got 1 from mom and 1 from dad. Now, if there's a gene on mom's that says blue eyes, there might be a gene on dad's that says brown eyes, and it'll be found in about the same location. Homologous chromosomes are the same size, and they have the same kinds of genes in the same locations on them. So they're matched pairs, but the exact genes that are on each set might be different. They might say different things. Whereas sister chromatids, you can see that each one of these chromosomes in this pair has 2 legs. Those 2 legs are the sister chromatids. And sister chromatids are physically attached to each other at that little waist called the centromere. And whatever's written on one chromatid will be written on the other. If it says blue eyes on the right-hand chromatid, it'll say blue eyes on the left-hand chromatid attached to that same chromosome. Okay? Now you can see that there are 23 pairs of chromosomes in this karyotype image. The first 22 are what we call autosomes. Everyone has these 22 autosomes. They might look a little bit different from person to person, they'll have different genes, but everyone's got these 22 pairs of autosomes. The last pair, the 23rd pair, is not necessarily homologous. Those are your sex chromosomes. So most human beings have 22 pairs of autosomes and 1 pair of sex chromosomes. Now, in humans, your biological sex is determined by these sex chromosomes. If you have 2 X chromosomes, that is biologically female, and if you have an X and a Y chromosome, that is biologically male. Now, you could have a situation where you are missing that second sex chromosome, where it's just X naught, right? There's nothing there. And then you would end up being biologically female in that situation as well. Now, if you had a Y chromosome and no X, that embryo would not survive. There's too much important information on the X chromosome to allow that to happen. So what this tells us is that the default setting for vertebrate embryos, this is true of all vertebrates, is female. And there are a lot of other possible combinations of sex chromosomes you could end up with, which gives you interesting little variations on those themes. So you could have 3 X chromosomes, you could have XXY, you could have XYY, all kinds of interesting combinations, and each one has slightly different results. But for the majority of the population, you have 2 sex chromosomes, and it's either going to be a matched set of X chromosomes or an X and a Y. Now, if you take a look down there at that X and Y chromosome, you might notice something, that the X chromosome is much larger than the Y chromosome. And this makes sense. Every human being has at least 1 X chromosome. So that you can put some important information on there, because it's guaranteed that any human being will have at least 1 of them. But only 50% of the population, give or take, has a Y chromosome, and you would not want to put any genes that are important to the development of the organism on the Y chromosome for that reason. You wouldn't want to put a gene that's important for developing lung tissue on the Y chromosome, because only half of your population is going to have that gene. So that means that half of your population would have malformed lungs as a result. So only the genes that are related to biological maleness are on that Y chromosome. However, the X chromosome is a fairly large chromosome because everyone has at least 1, so you can put some important stuff on there. This karyotype, I don't know who it's from, but I can tell you that they have a normal number of chromosomes. They have 22 pairs of autosomes, 44 autosomes total, the non-sex chromosomes, and they have 2 sex chromosomes. They have an X and a Y, so this person would be biologically male as a result. So as I said, if you have 2 sets of chromosomes, we call that being diploid. And for humans, the diploid number is 46. That's how many chromosomes you have in a diploid cell. So down here, you can see a man and a woman. It's our breeding pair here. And we've abbreviated this 2N equals 46. Okay, so diploid is abbreviated 2N. N represents the number of pairs of chromosomes. So if you have a number of chromosomes equal to 2N, you have 2 sets of each kind of chromosome. So diploid is 2N. Then they undergo this process of cell division called meiosis, where they create haploid gamete cells. Haploid gamete cells. And gametes have only 1 copy of each type of chromosome. So the number of chromosomes that a haploid cell is equal to N. It's equal to the number of pairs. So N equals 23. We abbreviate haploid cells as being just N. 2N, diploid, N is haploid. Those two haploid cells then come together and we get a fertilized zygote, a diploid zygote, back to 46 chromosomes, which then develops through mitosis. It undergoes cell division many times, and eventually it grows up into a full-blown adult, which is then able to undergo meiosis to produce its own gamete cells and start the cycle over. Because we cut the number of chromosomes in half every time we make gamete cells, this process never ends up doubling the number of chromosomes. We have to cut it in half so we can add them together. Cut it in half, add them together. Cut them in half, add them together. And then every single generation has the same number of chromosomes as it always has.